Start broadcasting, many people must do it. Yes. Manorama ma'am, you can have your camera. Yes. But you are on mute. Yes.
I was thinking so that it won't disturb the, connection and all that. That's why I had kept it mute.
No, it doesn't work like that. Okay. Okay, in this, I think in 10-15 seconds. Yes. Start broadcasting.
Please go ahead. Please start.
Should I start?
Indu sir.
Okay. Welcome, friends.
So your voice is
talk. Is it coming now? Oh, 1 second. Mute. 1 second.
This is better. This is better.
Yes, sir. Go on.
Is it okay now? Huh? Okay.
Yes.
Is it better now?
Yes, please.
Simi? Okay.
So
Welcome,
you're
friends,
very much
to the
audible.
Web Policy Talk of IMPRI. And in fact, it's my pleasure to do the talks, which is in partnership with IMPRI and the Gender Impact Study Center. Today we'll be talking about the state of gender equality. And of course, I think the series that we're going to talk about is on gender gaps. So we are starting this talk with one of the eminent persons we have amongst in our midst, and that's Professor Rekha Pande. She's currently the director of SEED, Society for Empowerment Through Environment Development. She was a former director of the Center for Women's Studies and professor of history in the University of Hyderabad, India. She's a well-known and well-published scholar in the interdisciplinary areas of history and women's studies. She is an established academician in the field of international studies, women's history, and gender studies. As a feminist historian, she has been concerned with the theoretical and methodological problems of reconstructing women's history and understanding the historical roots of women's subordination in the South Asian context. She also attempts to examine the varied historical context at the regional local levels and explain the reproduction subordination of women at the national and global scale in a variety of related, albeit different, contemporary contexts. She has been an academic activist also associated with the women's movement in India. She has a large amount of experience working with the national government, state government, and NGOs and international organizations. A historical sensibility and a combination of two major perspectives, cultural studies and feminism, influences the work, which covers diverse areas such as social movements, gender construction, religious and cultural aspects, and women's movements in India. She is also an active interlocutor of teaching and learning practices, its reconstitution within the classroom, university structures, and through national and international professional bodies. In 2019, she has been invited by the National Commission for Women, New Delhi, as a national resource person for gender sensitization, for its gender sensitization and gender development programs. Rekha Pandeji's various single authored and edited books. She has authored numerous articles, shows her feminist research orientations to explore multiple aspects of women's issues and cultural history of women. She has to her credit 17 books, most important being Devdasis in South India, A Journey from Sacred to Profane Spaces 2017, Sex Trafficking in South Asia, with a special focus on India 2016, Women's Studies Narratives, Travels and Triumphs 2015, Gender Lens, Women's Issues and Perspectives, edited 2015, Journey into Women's Studies, Crossing Interdisciplinary Boundaries. She's an editor in 2014, Globalization, Technology, Diffusion, and Gender Disparity, Social Impacts of ICTs. Well, in fact, friends, I can go on and on. The only thing here to note is we have an eminent scholar, Professor Rekha Pande, and she would be talking about gender gaps and gender equality. And today in India, we do see gender gaps in every field, be it social, economic, health, political, any dimension. And so, in terms of gender gaps, there are plenty. And what does gender equality that we talk about and in fact encapsulates in dealing with gender gaps as such. So maybe through her experience, through her varied research, we will be discussing these issues. So over to Rekha Pandeji, and we have friends Govind Kelkarji and all to also contribute. And after her lecture, we would be opening up for questions. So many of you who want to ask questions, feel free. You can use the chat box and all. And there are friends, Pragya, Kilesh, and Arjun and Simi, who will be telling us on the chats as to what questions are there and which Rekhaji can take up as an answer. So Rekhaji, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Arjun, for that wonderful introduction. I'm really very happy to be here. And especially, I would like to thank Indu Prakash ji, Govind Kelkar, Seme for being here. And what I plan to do today is I'll just divide my talk. I've been told that I have 40 minutes. So I'll quickly speak about why gender equality is important, and there are certain concepts which are very important, and somehow we have a vague idea, but we really do not know what they stand for. So I'm going to discuss these concepts, and then I'll pick up certain areas where we have gender gaps, and then I'm going to focus on, in the time of pandemic, what is happening, and then I will look at men's role and how we can include the men in building gender equality, and then I'll give my conclusion. Now, why is it that gender equality matters? This is the most important question. And all of us know that women and represent half of the world's population. And if half of the world's population and its we cannot use its potential, then there would be a stagnation for even social progress, because when half the population is living in an unequal status, you cannot really have any kind of progress. And there are so many inequalities which girls face just because of their gender, and this is something which one can see right from the time of the birth. And as the girls move from childhood to adolescent and an elder age, these disparities only widen. And there are a lot of disadvantages which women and girls have. There is not real empowerment in that sense. So, when we talk of advancing gender equality, it is very critical to the developing of a healthy society, whether we are talking in terms of reducing poverty, promoting health, education, and protection, and the well-beings of both boys and girls. It is very important, because gender equality is nothing but a human right. Unless you have this human right, we cannot have any kind of social, economic progress. And equality is about ensuring that every individual has an equal opportunity to make the most of their lives and talents. It is a belief that no one should have a poor life chances because of the way they are born, where they come from, what they believe in, or whether they have any kind of disability. Now, gender equality recognizes that historically there were certain groups of people with lot of protected characteristics, and you can have race, disability, sex, sexual orientations, whose experience have been very different, and they have always experienced discrimination. And therefore there is a need to have a more gender sensitive society, because unless we have a gender sensitive society, we cannot bring in any kind of social change. And a gender sensitive society can also work to, and understand better the multidimensional roles played by the women. Uh, this whole, gender sensitization is viewed as a very critical instrument to improve our knowledge about society, which at present is very partial, biased, and it only projects that view of social reality which is, derived from a male perspective. So it is very important, if our final goal is creating a gender just society, we need to bridge this gap and bring in more and more women into the mainstream. All of us know that two very important concepts are sex and gender. See, sex is something which is biological, natural, it is constant, given, it is very non-hierarchical. Men are the other sex, and it does not have any subgroup. Whereas gender is something which is a creation of society. It's a social cultural aspect. It is learned, and it is very hierarchical. And since it is not natural, it can be changed. Another very important concept is patriarchy, the rule of the father, the whole system of social structure and practices, which makes male domination and women subordination, kind of structure. It interlocks with a lot of other social structures like class and caste. Now, having said that, it is not that the world is divided into a binary of men and women, all men are dominating and all women are dominated. It is nothing like that. A man can be equally gender sensitive, and a woman can be equally gender insensitive. It's all a level of the kind of sensitivity that you have. And it is, in a patriarchy, men control most of the thing, whether it is property, economic resources, labor, reproduction, sexual mobility. And we see manifestations of patriarchy all around us. There is so much of a son preference in our society. In many areas, there is a discrimination against girls in the distribution of food. They have restricted opportunities for education. Domestic violence is so rampant. Sexual harassment at the workplace is common. And women have very limited rights, control over reproductive rights and productive rights. Because of these, we have concepts, we have also created a dichotomy between the private and the public world. We've divided the world into two. The public world is the external world of labor, military defense, decision making, protection of livelihood, and it is all associated with men. Whereas, the private world is the internal world of home, family, domesticity, reproduction, and it is all associated with women. We have even divided human qualities into two. You have feminine qualities and masculine qualities. Feminine are supposed to be not very aggressive, not independent, very emotional, easily influenced, home oriented, they cry very easily. Whereas masculine qualities are those seen as being very aggressive, independent, not emotional, objective, very dominant. They are very worldly. They are not supposed to cry. When a boy cries at home, you say, "Kya ladkiyon ki tarah ro raha hai?" These are the kind of expressions that we have. And this is something which comes about because of socialization. The whole process by which a child becomes an individual, respecting his or her environment, laws, norms, and customs. Now, gender socialization for how we bring up a girl, what we teach her. You always have pink for girls, blue for boys. You give girls teacups, crockeries, dolls. For boys, we give trucks, machines, guns, etc. So, this whole society is divided into something called the sex gender system. It was the anthropologist Gail Rubin who had introduced this term, and it refers to the whole institutionalization of the system, which allows resources, property, and privileges according to culturally defined gender roles. And what are, women perform so many multiple roles. They are also involved in the production process, so they have productive roles. They are involved in reproduction, so they have reproductive roles. In many communities, they are also performing community and managerial roles. Two other very important concepts are gender equality and gender equity. Gender equality is a long-term goal. It is the absence of discrimination based on sex. We can have equality between men and women when both the sexes are able to share equally in the distribution of power and influence. And gender equity is the whole process of being fair to women. It includes strategies, measures, which must be available to compensate for women's historical and social disadvantage that prevents women and men from otherwise, operating in a level playing field. For example, if everybody, we give shoes to everyone, 5 number shoes to everyone, that's equality. But if you give 3 number to those who need 3 numbers, 4 to those who need 4, 5 to those who need 5, then we talk of equity. So it is through equality that we can lead to gender equality. And what is very important is this whole, we have to integrate gender equality perspective into our policies, programs, and projects. Unless we have gender mainstreaming, we cannot support gender equality at all levels, and this is very much needed for the progress of society. Now, there is something which the World Economic Forum came up in 2006. It developed a global gender gap index, and this was a framework for capturing the whole magnitude of gender-based disparities and tracking their progress over time. So what this index does, it benchmarks the national gender gaps based on 4 criteria, namely economic, education, health, and political criteria. Now, it's not possible to study each and every country individually. So what this does, it divides the whole world into 8 regions. You have East Asia and Pacific, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Latin America, Caribbean, Middle East, North Africa, Northern America, Southern Asia, Africa, and Western Europe. We are part of Southern Asia. The Global Gender Gap Report of 2020, it points out, it says that unless women are actively involved, only once women are actively involved, it can lead to a greater well-being and better functioning of the economic system and the labor market. Indeed, the growth of the female employment rate and the reduction of gender gaps in the world context can really lead to a lot of, it can give a strong stimulus to GDP growth. If we look at this report, our rank, India ranks 112th as far as the Global Gender Gap Index is concerned among the 153 countries studied. And especially the economic gender gap runs so deep in India. Right from 2006 to 2020, this gap is only widening. It is very interesting that, today, India's one of the countries where, women are really withdrawing from the economic area. And we find that there are 1/4 of the women, that is about 82% of the men who are actively engaged in the labor market. And you have compared to the men, you have less number of women, only 1/4 of them who are engaged in the labor market. And our rank here is 145th in the world. Furthermore, if you look at the kind of income which women are earning when compared to the men, we have one of the lowest income, and our rank is 144th. The only area where we made slight progress is in the area of leadership. About 14% of the women. Our rank here also is 136. not something very great, but definitely when compared to economic and all, it is very 136 is much better. Now, look at the areas where you have gender inequality. So many areas you have. Look at our whole, I was talking of patriarchy, the whole sex ratio, violence against women, harassment, trafficking. Look at our polity, health, education, and economy. If you look at the sex ratio, in 1901, for every 1,000 boys, we had 972 girls. By the time we come to 2011, for every 1,000 males, we have had 914 girls. So it is such a patriarchal society that to be born female comes very close to being born less than human. We find that discrimination begins even before birth. Because look at the female fetuses that are aborted. There is a reluctance to seek medical aid once these children are born. It is very sad. 2 days back, the Hyderabad newspapers had a report that a girl child, newborn girl child, was wrapped in a rug and she was thrown out in the street from a moving auto. The passers-by tried to stop that auto, by that time it had fled. So luckily they brought this child. She had suffered so many injuries and she was admitted into the hospital. See, that is how we treat our girl children. Again, a few years back, there was a woman who jumped from Charminar, with a girl child. She had given birth to two girl children. This was her third child. But being a mother, the way she fell, she saw to it that the child was, she fell, she took all the load of that falling, and the child was on her breast, and the child survived. So, this is how we treat girl children. Gender roles are, after all, conceived, taught, and enacted in a very complex set of relationship within the family and the society. The girl child grows with such a low self-esteem. She always grows with this notion of that they have to be disposed of early. In fact, in the Atharveda, more than 3,500 years back, there is a prayer where the husband and wife, the moment the wife gets pregnant, they both go and pray to the sun god and they say, "Oh God, grant us a son here and a daughter elsewhere." If you read these texts, there are so many vrats. The Pumsya Vansa vrat is only to get a male child. If there are so many evil omens which are spoken about, they have this power to convert a male fetus into a female fetus. So all our texts talk about this till today. Dudo naho puto fellow, may you be blessed with hundreds of sons. These are all there. As part of a project, we had started collecting sayings, and I'm sure this applies throughout India, wherever you look at it. There is not much has changed even today. There is a saying here in Andhra, in Telugu, saying, "A daughter is like ghee. Both are good to a certain point. If you do not dispose them of early, they will start stinking." It says, bringing up a daughter is like watering a plant in someone else's garden. If you tell lies, you will have a female child. It is better to be born in a jungle than to be born as a girl. It is easier to perform an Ashwamedh Yagya than to perform the marriage of a daughter. So, these proverbs, I'm only talking about Andhra and Telangana. I'm sure, you look at it, Bihar, Punjab, everywhere we have these proverbs. Look at all the abuses. They use the sexuality of women. Who, I have hardly to think of an abuse that uses the sexuality of men. But it is the men who are using these abuses and using the sexuality of women. Another major area where we have a lot of gender gap is this whole, gender violence which you have in our society. See, recently all of us are reading in the newspapers, the televisions are filled, the rape cases which happened in Uttar Pradesh. The many kinds of violence against women and girls can be understood as gender-based violence. It could result in physical, sexual, or even psychological harm. It could lead to a lot of threat, arbitrary deprivation of liberty in both public and private life. There was a big campaign which went on saying, "Take back the night." Why is it that the night spaces are not safe for women? Why don't women have a right over these spaces? So this was a big, movement which started all around the world. And what we find is violence is much more in Asian society, especially India. You find it in the family, at society at large. It cuts across income, class, religion, and culture. And the main reason for this violence is the unequal power relationship. Our whole notion of sexuality, cultural ideology, the doctrine of privacy is responsible for this. Something very unique in an Asian culture is we have defined masculinity at the expense of women. A man's honor rests in women. So, what happens in a communal crisis or in a caste war? The first person to be affected is the women. What happened in partition? The Muslim men went and raped Hindu women, cut off their private parts. Hindu men went and raped Muslim women. And it was not that they were taking revenge against these women. It was that they were trying to send a lesson to the men that you are not man enough to protect your women. So we have defined masculinity at the expense of women, and both upper class domination and capitalism has led to more and more violence against women. And South Asia is the worst scenario because we can really see this bias if you look at the life expectancy of men and women. And South Asia is the lowest in the world. Women always have a genetical biological advantage, which makes them more resistant to infection and malnutrition. In developed countries, women have a life expectancy of 7 years more than men. But in South Asia, it is only 1 year more than that of men, which is the lowest in any region in the world. Now we have to understand violence as, not just a man hitting his women, but it in a society where so much of violence continues, it has a lot of cost to the society. It has a political cost, economic cost, and a social cost. See, we are all talking of women's empowerment. It is limited by gender violence. If women continue to be beaten, they have no control over resources, their bodies. What kind of empowerment can we bring about? And it prevents human security. The UNDP in its report in 1994, for the first time it said human security is a fundamental goal, and it has to be also security in our daily lives. Earlier, whenever we were talking of human security, we are talking of cross-border terrorism, national terrorism. But this said that unless there is security in your daily life, you cannot really have security. So, the democratic processes in any country can only be strengthened if women have, more control over things, where there is less violence against them. The whole democratic institutions and the democratic processes can really be strengthened if gender violence is addressed. Gender violence also has an economic cost, because we at one level we talk of elevation of poverty. It impedes an equal distribution of resources and control over them. The whole process of food production, processing, nutrition, health, child development, protection of environment, income generation, growth of economy, everything will suffer if women continue to be beaten. Violence against women also has direct cost on the legal system, the health system. When women are beaten, raped, sexual abuse, there are all kinds of medical costs. And if the marriage breaks, there are legal costs. And you bring in, the employer loses because the women is not able to go to work, and the women also loses. So there are economic costs. And there are also lot of social costs, because it undermines the whole functions and threatens the viability of family as an institution. The family is meant to protect, shelter, and nurture its member. But then in a society where so much of violence goes on, what do you teach your children? That you can just beat your women and get whatever you want? So women then, lose out. They have no control over reproduction, health outcomes, and this has a lot of negative effects on society. So, this is something where you have the maximum, gender gap, and this is something which has to be addressed. Another kind of harassment is sexual harassment at the workplace. In fact, before many years, there was nothing like a term like sexual harassment. Women just called it life. When we were young, when we were students, there was nothing like sexual harassment. You accepted it as part of life because you're born a woman. It was in 1978 that Lynn Fairley, in her book Sexual Shakedown, introduced the term for the first time. In 1979, it was again reinforced by Catherine McKinnon, where she published this whole book on sexual harassment of the working women. And over the years, you had a lot of legislation, broad feminist theorization, which came up. In the US, there was a very landmark judgment in 1974 known as the Michelle Vinson case. Now, this was, Sidney Taylor was the vice president of this bank, and Vincent had received various salaries, promotions. She rose to the level of, a very assistant branch manager. She was a very efficient manager, but then she was dismissed from her job, saying that she was taking too many leaves, and this happened in 1978. And when her job was terminated, she went to the court, and in the federal district court, it ruled out, saying that there was no case of harassment because she herself was in a sexual relationship with her boss, Vincent. See, it did not realize that it was a very power relationship, and there was no way this woman could have said no. But then again, when it went to the Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia Circuit, it recognized sexual harassment, and in a landmark judgment called the Winston and Meritor Saving Bank case, she was, given back all her benefits, and it said that it understood that there was a power equation. In India, we never had anything like a sexual harassment act. We were treating earlier under the Indian Penal Code, you had section 209, where any kind of obscene acts or songs were treated as offense, section 354, section 409. But we had 2-3 cases earlier, Radhabai and Ramchandran in 1973, when she was the secretary to the social welfare minister. And when, she stood against the abuse of girls in the welfare institution, she was molested and dismissed. But then she won the case and got back her benefits. Similarly, S.C. Bhatia, a professor in the Department of Adult and Continuing Education in the University of Delhi, he was dismissed in 1992. The very famous case of Rupandev Bajaj and KPS Gill in 1988, where, he hit her posterior and she went and filed a complaint. In India, the really law came up with the Bhavri Devi case, who was a social worker with the government's development program in Bhateri village. She tried to stop a marriage, a child marriage which was taking place. And since the marriage was in an upper caste and she belonged to the lower caste, she was raped. And finally, many of the women's group filed a writ petition saying that, she was molested because she was working at that time. And the Supreme Court laid the Vishakha guidelines on 13th August 1997. And soon in 2013, this came in the form of sexual harassment of women at the working place, prevention and prohibition. So, any kind of physical contact, demand for favors, sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, all these are treated as sexual harassment. Now, it is so difficult to talk about it. Look at our mindsets. We always, Mulayam Singh, what did he say in the parliament? He says, "Londe to londe hi rahenge." It is something very natural for men. And many were said when Rupandev Bajaj had filed a case that she's making a mole out of, she's making a mountain out of a molehill. It was nothing great. So what did he do? He just slapped her posterior. When the Me Too movement came up, there was so much criticism against it. But definitely, it gave the women the power. They may have not gone to court. Some went to court. They did not get justice. Yes, many of them took 15, 20 years to make a complaint. But finally, the Me Too movement showed. They named these people. They were very powerful people. They were shamed. And so, there are so many myths which are created on sexual harassment. Look at films. Only it is shown that the most beautiful heroine or the girl in the college will be the one who will be harassed. She will keep saying no, but it is understood that finally she will say yes. It is seen as something very natural, male flirting, but it is an assertion of power rather than an expression of sexuality. It is also shown that women enjoy this eve teasing or sexual harassment. But reality is it is very humiliating and degrading. There are lots of discussions saying women ask for it because they wear revealing clothes, women who are single and divorced. So, there are so many myths which are created that it is harmless. But then, we only look upon women as temptress. And many think it's a personal problem between two individuals. It's a pervasive public problem and therefore it needs public solution. Many say women use sex to go ahead. But then, our society reduces the whole perception of a women to only sex. There are lots of myths saying prostitutes and those who work in, industries which are highly loaded, like, the beauty parlors, they cannot be sexually harassed. But the reality is that they are harassed. Today, what is happening, there is, especially with the advent of globalization, so much of commodification of women has taken place. The whole beauty industry is churning out projects at a mass scale. We have converted beauty into a cult. Women are presented only as sex objects. Look at the advertisement. Either she's very happy washing clothes, smelling fragrance of detergent, or a woman is shown as a sex object, selling everything from paint to brushes to, clothes. So a woman becomes redundant than beyond looking good. Today, one of the major issues is trafficking. This is one of the major agendas. It happens at district, interdistrict, interstate level. And there are, in my own book on trafficking, which I have written, there are 10 people who earn out of the earning of this girl who is, through deceit, she has been brought into it. There is a sprotter, a recruiter, a buyer, a seller, transporter, harborer, a financial, brothel keeper, pimp, and finally the client who is there. And this girl or woman is powerless, helpless, choiceless. She is debt bound and she's raped, accused in that. Today, if you look at polity in our country, all over the world, I mean, in the villages, we have given women the power to the 83rd and 84th Amendment. In the panchayats, we have no issue, but look at what is happening to the women's bill in the parliament. We don't want women to enter parliament because they will be decision-making power over there. Whereas in the panchayats, they only have to implement their decision. Today, every political party has a women's wing and they take up the so-called women's issues like price rise, violence, dowry, rape cases, etc. And, they think they have done enough, but they are not willing to give seats to women. After all, who are the politicians we have? They are either wives of, daughters of, sisters of some male politician. Again, if you look at the issue of health, today, this is referred to as 10:90 gap. Women suffer from 90% of the diseases and only 10% is spent on them. Look at this whole aspect of work. Women are doing 2/3 of the world's work. In exchange, they receive only 10% of the income and they own only 1% of the means of production. We always consider them as secondary workers. We know in India, there are more women in the unorganized sector than in the organized sector. Today, you have more women who are seen in, areas of the unorganized sector. You have the nurses will be women, the doctors will be men, the CEOs will be men, and the secretaries will be women. By and large, the university professors will be male, and primary school teacher will be women. Since women are at that lower level, they earn less. Now it is very important to understand that men also have a very important role. We cannot achieve gender equality till men play a very important role. We have to, men have always been part and policies of the whole development process. Look at our whole, the women's movement. Look at the social reform movement in India. The women were not educated. It all started by social reformers like Dayanand Saraswati, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chand, Vidya Sagar. And they were, then you had the women who came and started playing. Men have always played the role of gatekeepers. They have been responsible for decision making. They have been providing leadership roles in families and communities. Now we need to really expand this and, make the women also part of this whole, unless we recognize that, these rights are nothing but human rights. Women's rights are nothing but human rights. Many of my students talk to me and they say, ma'am, I don't want to take dowry, but if my parents take, I have no issues, because dowry does not concern me. I think the girl should be concerned with it. I tell them, fine, today it is not your issue, but tomorrow when you are going to become a father, when you will get your daughter married, don't you think it will become your issue? So uh, women's issues are nothing but human issues, and societal issues. And in society comprises of both men and women, and both have to be equally involved in it. And there is nothing like a fear. If you have equality, it also benefits men. Today, if you look at the world, the very fact that I'm addressing you from a laptop is because of this pandemic. And this is referred to as a shadow pandemic by UN, because the kind of violence which has happened in this period. One of the slogans of the pandemic is stay home and stay safe. But unfortunately, the home is not necessarily a safe place for many women. The National Commission really pointed out to this alarm, saying that there is a growing number of domestic violence cases. And this was something, you have seen throughout this period. Though women continue to have more work, see, with servants not coming, old people not being allowed near young children because of the fear of the pandemic, care work for women has increased. Their burden of work has increased. Household work has increased, because all this unpaid work is done by women. And we have, now with domestic violence increasing. In fact, the National Commission has come up with a WhatsApp number on April 10th. And in the period from March 23rd to April 16, it had 239 cases that were registered to it. So this is something which is very important. Now, I would like to, I'm nearing my time, so I would just quickly conclude by, whom do we blame for this state? How can we bridge the gap? Who is to be blamed? Is it men, women, or men and women both? I think we are asking the wrong question. Instead of asking who is to be blamed, we should ask what is to be blamed. And if we change the question, it will lead us to an analysis of patriarchy, capitalist mode of production relation, the whole division of society into social and economic groups, looking at issues of caste, class, religion, and we will get our answers. Our society is governed by patriarchy, by social norms. And the whole institutional construction of gender is something which we have to develop a very sensitive attitude to it. Now, what is the way out? We have to really re-socialize the changing context. We have to understand with empathy the gender roles and divisions and sharing. Our whole perception, attitude, behavior needs to be changed. And as an institution, it has to start with the individual. Once the individual changes, the family changes, society changes, and then we move forward. So therefore, I would like to conclude by saying that, today we have so many gender gaps which are there, but gender equality really matters. And it is something which is very vital for our society. And it can only happen if we change the values of our society. We should learn to measure our masculinity in terms of equality. One can start at home by teaching one's son to fight against inequality, and to teach one's daughter to fight against, break that silence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rekha Pande. I must say this was one of the illustrious discussions we had, and what a good beginning to the entire web talk that we are having on, gender gaps. I think I just want to say here that she has raised valid issues. I'm not going to sum up. I can only say that she brought in the various gender gaps that have existed historically. She has also mentioned as to how the law is there but has failed to ameliorate the condition at times. She has mentioned about different domains where we still find gender gaps, and how in the World Economic Forum report, the matrix that they have had, India has fared worse. I think where I think India comes 112 of the 153 countries. So it's a very interesting discussion. I just want to, I think, open discussion by also sharing that, because you mentioned that, in fact, I have written about 4 books on women's issues, and in my first book, I quote Devi Bhagwat, which declares, "Women are neither friends nor foes." Mind you, this is Devi Bhagwata. Women are neither friends nor foes. They perpetually crave for every new man. They desire any well-dressed male they see, but in order to obtain what they want, they will make a show of chastity. In public, women are even modest, but when they get to their beloved in private, they make as if to devour them. They bestow more affection on men who satisfy them sexually than their own children. Now, like, this is Devi Bhagwat. Similarly, there's our dear Buddha in Milinda Pana. He says what? With opportunity and secrecy and the right word, all women will go wrong. A, falling with other, with a cripple even. Now, some of these great men that we had, religious leaders that we had, I think I can go on and on saying, and of course, we had a famous, Tulsidas, Dhol Gawar Shuddha Prashanari, Ye Hai Taran Ke Adhikari. And I also want to bring in here that during my own research and all, I realized that we need to question some influential men. So I took to reading what Gandhi said, what Vivekananda said, and I want to share here that Vivekananda in this book, called Our Women, he says something very, very important. So see how deep-rooted patriarchy is. He says, even I who never married, belonging to the order that never marries, would be disgusted if my wife, supposing I had married, dared to displease my mother. I would be disgusted. Why? Don't I worship my mother? Why should not her daughter-in-law, whom I worship, why not she? Who is she then that would try to ride over my head and govern a mother? Now, imagine these are the men that we glorify. And of course, it is not denying the fact that the Chicago address that he gave, way back in 1893 and all that, fantastic and all. But only when you question them on women's issues, I remember Lenin once said on, women's issues that you scratch the communist, Philistine appears. Lenin, like one of the persons who is known for, what he brought in Russia and all, even he was aware. So I think, this has been going on in a society, and I think maybe we've followed, I think we have followed patriarchy as such in a big way. And as you rightly said, that, I think a time has come when we need to, change individually, change family, change society, and I think that's how the world will change. And I also agree with you that women's issues are actually issues which are for men, for humans, as well as societal issues. It is not only women's issues as per se. So thanks a lot for this fascinating discussion and fascinating points that you raised. I think surely I know that it's been recorded and will be shared by IMPRI largely for the benefit of many other people as well. And we really enjoyed your sharing. I would surely want, maybe before we open, if Govindji is there, if she would like to say a few things, Govindji, and then we open up for discussion.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm there.
Yeah.
That's right.
Govindji, please.
Thank you, Rekha and Induji, for making a very good kind of passionate presentation. When it comes the kind of thing that initially there was a questioning in the about the so-called objective social sciences, that why women become very passionate when they are talking about the subject. But it is not really a question of women become passionate. It is a question of involvement one's kind of the passion. That is involvement in the subject and how it touches your heart and how it touches your whole lifestyle. And that makes any man or woman as a kind of passionate person in terms of speaking. That is the speaking means pouring one's heart out kind of thing. That would be the. So Rekha, we greatly enjoyed. Thank you very much. This thing. I was also really think that we should really ask both questions. Who is to be blamed and what is to be blamed? Because masculinity and patriarchy, these are the kind of things in which women and men are socialized. Women are also socialized into kind of thing, son preference and all this kind of. There is a complicit element of women in kind of creating patriarchy. That kind of Gerda Lerner has done this research, and we also see that how when the India and China, Pakistan, these are the shining examples of emerging economy of the South, where the discrimination and the kind of elimination of the female child is there, and that is one thing. So it is not only discrimination and oppression, but it is the physical elimination is also there. But what I was thinking that we also really need to build hope for as a movement person. I mean, we have shared the movement together, Rekha. You see that kind of both nationally and internationally, and in Asia and Africa in particular. That is that why, despite this exploitation, oppression, and inequality, women have made it. Okay, they are. Today, if women are speaking like Rekha does, and IMPRI invites her, this is the kind of, it is about 20 years or 25 years, 20 years definitely. If you discuss the subject of rape, it would be submitted as something very, very immodest. If you discuss the subject of women, it would be considered as the ridicule. Oh, these are the economist meeting and you are talking of women's subject. It is a subject which does not deserve any kind of attention. So these things have changed completely. The whole paradigm shift has taken place in terms of the development. So I was thinking that we should really think of the other side also. That despite this, there is a kind of, I would stress only 2 points. One is that we need to, younger researchers are there. I think we need to have the gender analysis you were very thorough in your concept. Thank you very much. And the gender analysis should be carried out, and it gives you an objective picture: who controls, who does the work, who does what, who does not do what, and who controls the resources, and who gets the benefit out of that, and whose entitlement the things are. So that is one thing that one question that not question, but supplementary thing that I wanted to draw your attention. Second, I also wanted to really women's agency in the system. Agency is growing up. Despite all this kind of state, families are forced to reckon with that this needs to be addressed, kind of thing. It is no longer we can keep sitting, be quiet about it. Let it happen, whatever happens to women, and we are not, we are kind of, we are quiet about it. One is the very important school of thought which really by lawyers, by social scientists, which think that this violence against women, which has increased many-fold, and rapes have become gang rapes kind of thing. That means that is the attack in groups that is happening on women, single women or young girls. And this shows only that women are asserting their power. And power holders who were earlier men, they could not take this power. But women are asserting this kind of the power. They are talking, they are going to the police, state is able to reckon with. When I see Nirbhaya case or I see the recent Hathras case, I not only see the brutality and the barbarity of the act, I also see how many people are demonstrated against it, women and men together. And this kind of awakening gives me a great deal of hope. So it is the kind of picture that I would really, why economists like Amartya Sen talks about women's agency, talks about that kind of this has to develop. Whole course of human development report has changed. Whole debate on the human rights have changed. This morning I was in the UN discussion on UN escape, and they were building the scenario for 2040. And in this scenario, there was limited attention with regard to the gender concern. In fact, people did not talk about it. And then one line came and saying that where are women, 50% of the kind of scenario you are building and not including 50%. And immediately there was such a kind of excuse and taking into account. So no dismissal of the question. Of course, it is even the same patriarchal masculine mindset that decides the thing. But I think there is also, we have made kind of dent in our thinking, in our actions, and that gives us hope. Thank you. I would, with a lot of appreciation for your wisdom, passion, articulation, Rekha, I would give up kind of the floor now to you and to the audience, to whoever it is, or wants to really kind of raise some questions and critiques to any one of us.
Sure, sure. So I would say thank you, Govindji, for your apt views on that, and then how I think you saw the positive side of it, and you surely said that how the women's agency is growing, and we need to hope against hope. And so I think apart from the real hopelessness at times you feel, I think what you said brings a lot of hope, and thank you for that. So I would really open it for discussion amongst friends. So anybody who's been listening to it, you can raise your questions, you can come in, unmute and raise your questions, whether it's Pragya, is Arjun, is Simi, and other friends, yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah,
yes.
Please, Simi.
I think Rekha ma'am is logged out for some reason. But anyways, this can be a question. Sorry?
Oh, shit. Okay. Oh, no. Yeah, I think we'll take the question still. I think because we have people.
Okay.
No, Rekha ma'am is in attendees. She will, yes. No issue. Simi, you can go on, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think Arjun will get it back. Yeah, Arjun, get it back. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you, ma'am. And of course, Rekha ma'am's presentation was really very passionate and very insightful. And it made me personally think a lot. I have when she was discussing about the international cases of sexual harassment and the struggles of women, I was forced to think about the historical evolution of crimes against women. And if I root it to in the Indian context, I can see the Manuism or Manuvad philosophy, so as to say, where the Varnashram is there, and then it is explicitly written that it is in the nature of women to seduce the men, and it is good for the Brahmins to take Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras as their wives, and similarly for Kshatriyas to take Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, the castes below their own and their own, and for Shudras it is only for they can take only the Shudra women for as their wives. And similarly, if a Brahmin woman marries a Shudra man, then she is eligible to become an outcast. She should be thrown out of that caste. So I think this sort of, if we, how do we draw parallels, or this itself is a reason for the subordinate position of women in Indian society. And where do we draw the roots, or where are the roots of general or global crimes against women, so as to say, because women around the world hold a subordinate position with respect to men. This is my open question. Thank you.
Sir, I had also a very simple question.
Yes, Arjun. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for your very insightful lecture, and I really wanted to understand.
Can you hear? 1 minute, Arjun. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but your video is
okay.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know this. I'm coming through my phone now. Some issue. Okay.
No issue, ma'am. You can see turn on the video sign. Yes.
Let others speak. There is some issue.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. In addition to what Dr. Simi Mehta just said, I really wanted to know that, yes, Gandhiji also said that if we have to measure the development, then we have to see the status of women. And now, after a century, in your view, what has changed for women, and where are they situated? And what is this really 21st century about for women? On this historical perspective, I really wanted to have your views. Yes, over to you.
Pragya, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please go.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arjun Kumar. Suddenly the internet went, there is a big rain over here, and so I had to come through my phone. Since Dr. Indu Prakash was also, yeah.
I think I just want one thing to say. I think, can we take all the questions and you can answer? Is that okay?
Fine. No,
yeah, but this Pragya, actually, shall we talk now? Pragya, over to you.
Yeah, it was a very enlightening panel. And continuing on both what Dr. Simi Mehta and Dr. Arjun Kumar have said, one thing that Dr. Simi Mehta mentioned was about the caste factor also. So I think one question that is very pertinent is about the increased vulnerability of women from particular castes. So I want to ask this question, what about the layers of double discrimination when we are linking the problems of women with particular minority communities? That is first. Second, my question is, how is it that we can keep talking about equality when women continue to be in unessential and unfulfilling roles? So, according to the book by Dr. Simone de Beauvoir, in her second sex, she says that women continue to be doing the roles of which are immanent in nature, which are inessential in nature, and men continue to be hosting those things against them and having all the agency and the autonomy. And similarly, they are doing the tasks which are more transcendental in nature. So can we talk about equality if women are put or pressured to be in those roles? Thirdly, a very good point by Dr. Indu Prakash Singh sir, about when he mentioned that why are we not questioning the historical emphasis of men being subjected to particular myths of masculinity as well? Because unless and until we put men at the center of this whole debate, we don't think that it can be the bridges, the gap cannot be bridged. So these are the three subparts of my question. Thank you.
I think if Rekha ma'am, if you missed some points of Kelkar ma'am, because you got out, ma'am really highlighted the point that even the meeting today ma'am had no discussion from the half of the population. Or Kelkar ma'am, if you like to have anything specific, yes.
No, you can see that. But I appreciated very much, Rekha, your kind of passionate and articulated kind of and comprehensive discussion. But I wanted to say that in this kind of thing that supplemented by saying that I see a sense of progression also. Despite all this kind of attempt, masculine attempt, patriarchal attempts to suppress women, historical attempts, and why the and social norms. I mean, these are the kind of things that really kind of have perpetuated and perpetrated violence against women. But despite all this, women are making progress. There are women like you, and now it is not one queen syndrome. There are other social scientists also. There is Indu Singh also. I mean, there is Arjun. There is Simi. I mean, young Pragya. And so many people are like them. They are talking in terms of raising the questions. Why this state of women? And that kind of raising the question comes only when you become aware of your rights. That yes, we are entitled for human rights. We are entitled for our resource rights. We are entitled for our housing rights. We are entitled for individuality. So that is the thing that I said. There is a if you had the time, probably you would go into these details. So that was the question that I was raising. Not question, but supplementing you.
Yeah. Can I answer?
Yeah, please go ahead now.
Thanks a lot, Govind, for that wonderful analysis. Yes, we did make a lot of progress from the time, when we started. In some areas, yes, there is a lot of progress. In some areas, we still haven't moved very fast. If you look at the mindset, that is something we have not been able to change. There was a very interesting study done in and around Delhi, where, if you look at the female fetuses that were being aborted, the maximum were of groups that were very educated, very polished areas of Delhi. This study was published by India Today. And in spite of all our education, we have not been able to bring in certain values. Though today, we know what is right, politically right. So we speak in public forums in that way. But internally, the mindset is something which has not changed. See, it will take some time. This is a mindset which has been built for more than 3,500 years old. So yes, while there is a lot of progress in many areas, certainly 100 years back or 50 years back, what our mothers had to deal with, we are not dealing. But in some areas, yes, so it is, in some areas, there is a lot of progress, in others, we have not done. So that is what I would feel. And definitely, we need to really bridge this gap. Second, when we look at this whole question of status of women, this is something which has really, concerned a lot of us. As a historian, let me tell you, in 18th century, when the Britishers came towards, when they started writing the history, you had people like James Mill and all who were writing. And they said we can evaluate a civilization only if we look at the way it treats its women. So there was a lot of focus on women, and they somehow, you had a lot of these Orientalists who held up saying these Indian women are so brave, they can jump into the fire, they can commit sati without any fear. And these are, like Clarice Beta says, these are women who are, the Western women should learn from them, without realizing that, it was only the women's movement in 2005 who said that sati is nothing but a murder of a women. Earlier, the whole aura we had created in India, being a semi-feudal society, the mix between religion, tradition, folklore, everything is so mixed up that it really creates a lot of issues. And, the whole aura we had built up again around sati, There are Sati stones all over the country. There are Sati temples, and we hail these women. But in reality, how was Sati committed? You know, in Madhya Pradesh, you would dig a pit which was 10 feet deep. The Sati was taking place in that, so that, you know, the cries of the women could not even escape. Raja Ram Mohan Roy became so much involved because he saw his sister-in-law being forced to commit Sati. In a pole, they would tie the hands and legs. There would be so much of a beating of the gongs that her cries were not heard. But still, you know, we built this whole aura. So at one level, you know, we have treated women like goddesses, or as a whole, we don't see them as normal human beings, you know, unless we learn to treat them in that way. You know, we really will not be able to achieve much. Any other question I missed out?
No, I think, much of it has been covered.
There is something in the chat that one should read. Induji, there is something in the chat.
Yeah, I think, Arjun?
Yes.
Can you just read that, please?
Shivani Ladwal is asking, of course, man, we can look at the positive things. We get our parents are relatives. What should be the change that can? Yeah, the same thing, you know, that the sexual abuse, the state of the society, even the parent and the society is not letting out people to even report, or there is a stigma attached even in by this date that violences are being underreported. Ma'am, as rightly just said, that Raja Ram Mohan Roy took a stand because of he really closely looked into it. So, ma'am, what can be, if I can reframe the question and ask that, what can be the way ahead, and how other developing countries have moved to this transition so much so that in all the advanced economies, even I go and visit, I see at 11-12 p.m. only women and girls are there in their common public spaces. So, what is the road towards that? Yes, I think yes. Indu sir, you can.
Yes, see, we have not been able to make our public spaces safe. That is a big issue. Unlike, in many Western countries where at least the public spaces are little safe compared to India. If you look at it at night after 7, 8, you will not find any single women on the streets, all alone. Either they are accompanied by men. So this is a reality of our society. And like I said, what is very important is we have been socialized into thinking this for more than 3,500 years ago. This is the mindset we have developed. It's a very patriarchal society where you look at, the dominance of men and the subordination of women. So unless we change that mindset, and that mindset will come in through education, and if you bring in the right kind of values, if we have gender sensitive textbook, look at the films, the media, they are also biased. We have to really, there has to be a multi-pronged approach to deal with this issue. And only then, even today, if you look at it, how do we define a working woman? Economists have told us that a woman who gets a salary is a working woman. So, if I go to a university, I teach, I get a salary, that becomes work. But if I'm teaching my own children, after all, that's my duty. If I go and cook in someone else's house and I get a salary, that becomes work. But if I'm cooking in my own house, after all, that's my work. So, we have to really relearn these issues. And we have to, demystify a lot of these things. Women have been working throughout at home. They don't work for the production process. They may be, contributing to the value use of thing in Marxist terms. But then there has to be a recognition of the work which women are doing. It may not be for monetary terms, but it definitely adds value to that. So unless we add value to women, the work they are doing, we will not be able to deal with these issues. So, you have to really change this mindset along with education, bring in a kind of modern thinking, and then, we can really move forward.
Ma'am, one just small question which has really very pertinent and recent, I would say current affair question. Professor Kelkar Govind ma'am has also so much raised this question that what is happening on the front of ownership, be it asset ownership or be it, financial decisions coming. And one question, anonymous name is not there, that the discrimination is within the family. And when it comes to the inheriting ancestral property, there are nothing much. Also, something really came up last month, that the decision of 2006, that the right to property and other things. Where are we moving in this empowerment direction? Really looking into economic empowerment, because we have talked really a lot about economists are saying this and that. I somehow many a times start disliking my subject. But yes, what can be the way forward from the point of economic empowerment also? Because so many dimensions are getting,
Yeah.
related.
Yeah, see, definitely, like, if we look at the mindset, three brothers will very happily share their property. But if there are two brothers and one sister, if she asks for that property, then that relationship with her brothers will break. That is our mindset. Though, in India, we have to recognize there is a lot of difference between theory and practice. In theory, yes, you have all the rights, you have all the laws, you have, everything in your favor. But does it really happen in reality? How much do we give properties to girls? You somehow think because of the dowry we have compensated. And, it is very difficult, though it is there in in law, it does not happen. And within the family, there are a lot of questions which come up saying it is the mother-in-law who creates more problem for the daughter-in-law. It is this woman, it's a woman who cannot get along with the women. You keep hearing all that. But the mother-in-law there represents the patriarchal family. She does not see herself as a woman who is, siding with the other women. She sees herself as a representative of that patriarchal family. And so she is not able to see eye to eye with, the way her daughter is, acting. Or so, again, yes, there are issues in the family. We have to start with ourselves, with our family. And then, maybe, move forward, and a change would definitely come in.
Yeah. Yeah, Pragya,
Yeah.
please. Yeah, please
Yeah.
go ahead.
So one question that I have in my mind, which is I think one of the most important things to say, that while we notice that men are able to raise questions and speak about gender gaps in public spaces, both categories of people who are raising the question or part of the people who are not in the dialogue also, now they have understood practically what to speak about gender gaps publicly. But when it comes to practicing the same thing in their own closed private spaces, the narrative is totally different. And also their relationships with their own family members, especially their wives or their daughters, that's completely different. So I want to ask about that. How is it that we can bridge that gap? What can be done about that? Thank you.
Yeah, see, what you say is very correct. Like I said, the only difference is today we become very politically savvy. A person who's writing, I do a lot of trainings and I give a lot of lectures to IAS officers who get selected and all, in the Human Resource Development Chennareddy Institute at Telangana. And yes, we have very young boys who write wonderful essays on gender, who write, and that is what our education system has done. It has taught us how to speak politically right things. You may not change necessarily inside, but you know what to speak right in a public forum. Yes, that happens. But that doesn't mean that we cannot work in it. Yes, there are a lot of issues. Like I said, our mindset has taken so many years. We look upon patriarchy as something very natural, which cannot be questioned. But these are things, which will take time. It will come about little slowly, it does not come about so quickly. But yes, if you look at, we did a project where we looked at the grandmother, the mother and the daughter. The grandmother's experiences were so different from that of the mother and the daughter, so yes, at some level, the families are changing. When the grandmother was 15, 16, her experiences, the mother's experiences at 15, 16, and the daughter's experiences at 15, 16 to the same questions was very different. It may not necessarily be the same for other areas, but yes, society is changing, though a little slowly. But what we need to do is to expand this kind of a thinking, this kind of sensitivity, and that will only come when you built in a gender sensitive society. You have, these gender sensitization awareness which you create. See, in social sciences, unless you are aware of the problem, if you become aware of the problem, your 50% solution you can get. There are people who are not even aware of the issue. What kind of sensitization will they have? What kind of change will they bring about? So once you are sensitive to the issue, then you can work towards bringing in a change. So we need to create the sensitivity within the family, within the members. And everyone, like I said, it's a multi-pronged approach. The media, our socialization structure, our schools, colleges, institutions, family at large, everyone has to make gender issues a concern for each and every one. Only then will we be able to bring about a change.
Can
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
add something, Induji? Can I
Yeah,
say?
please go, Vinji. Yeah, sure.
I wanted to say something that I think that I also work on social norms. That social norms or the mindsets is not going to change unless we make changes in the material structures also. So the people will not become gender sensitive unless they are forced to share the property. Because my work on the land rights prove really the real resistance comes not from parents so much as it comes from brothers. That Telangana, I was once there, and this young man was saying mother wanted to give the property 1/3 only to daughter, and this young man brother said, over my dead body. And this was the Dalit household. This was so. Question is that he said, I can give 50,000 rupees, but I will not give this land to her. That would be the and there are numerous cases like this. So I think unless there is a kind of forced share of the property of the women, then only it would provide the economic empowerment. Without by only prescriptive measures and by sensitization only, the sensitization is essential, as rightly pointed out by Rekhaji, that without kind of people are not even aware. But real change will not happen unless their controlling of the thing is made illegal, and this has become a punishable act. Then only economic empowerment is possible. Otherwise, these things, this hodgepodge will continue. You will sound very progressive in public, and then at home you will do what you have been doing, what your father has been doing or forefathers have been doing.
Yeah. Thank you, Govindji, and thank you, Rekhaji. I want to quickly add here that, I think we'll bring it to the close. But before we bring it to the close, I just want to say here to Pragya's question that, I think, Pragya, it's very important that we all need to walk the talk, right? So, like when my daughter was about, in fact, I think I must say, I've got a son and a daughter. Son is the elder. And so I think when daughter was, I think, nearing her puberty, we called her and made one son sit there in front of us and and she's also Pragya, by the way. So we told her that, Pragya, if anybody touches you at your private parts, it could be me also, your dad, or it could be my brothers, your grandfather, or your mamas, or whatever. Your best friend is your mother, not even your dad. And I must tell you, I think, that really worked, and that is how she took up the sexual harassment matter in the school also, and somewhere the school could not match up. So I think we need to also somewhere say that, listen, I can be a perpetrator myself. So please watch out. So tomorrow, at least this thing of, that she could be, abused by somebody, she was empowered enough to know that, well, I think we can be having men as abusers, and her own dad can be an abuser, and she needs to air that out. That's very clear. And then I remember that, I told my son that, listen, a day I get a complaint against you about any sexual harassment, I'll be the first person to put you behind bars. Okay? So please behave, and no issues. I think so. Somewhere, as even Rekhaji spoke and Govindji spoke about sensitization is very important. Other issue I want to mention here is that, in fact, Rekha ji also spoke about, the sex determination tests and all that. Mitu Khurana was the first person who fought this PCPND matter, and she came up in Amir Khan's show at Satyamay Jayate. And this year, she passed away on 19th of March 2020, before the lockdown. And she passed away this, and she was really miffed up that neither the lower court, nor the high court, nor the Supreme Court defended her. And if you see her mails and everything, she died distraught. So somewhere a person who fought the PCPND matter, which could have been a landmark case, was actually negated by all the courts as such, And I think the final point would be also that, I think which was raised by Rekha ji and also Govind ji. I personally feel that, Govind ji and Rekha ji, that there is a continuum of patriarchy, which starts with glorification of women, and the other end is stigmatization, which I call it femicidalization. This idealization is actually femicidal. It annihilates the woman, and other is stigmatization. You are stigmatizing the woman as such, So we need to do away with this continuum and come up with a humanistic kind of an interface in a society as such, where I think both men and women bring the change in society. And I think we men, have got a greater responsibility than asking women to do this or that. Like there was this BJP party member who said, the women should be sanskari. On the Hathras case, he said women should be sanskari. I think he should have said that about the boys. As you mentioned about Mulam Singh Yadav, I think these patriarchs who are there, we need to shame them. Be they from any political party, whether it's BJP, is Janata Dal, or whether it's Lok Dal, whatever, So I think, so somewhere I would say that
in fact, the
we've had
Supreme Court Justice Kajju ji's response, something that you were writing about, sir.
Yes. I think what was it, Pragya? Can you just share that?
Yeah, so in one of the posts you also mentioned about his remarks, his rape apologist and remarks on how he was shifting the blame from men to the perpetrators, to the women themselves. Sorry.
Yeah, so, he imagine what a bizarre argument. He's a judge from Supreme Court. He makes a bizarre comment, I remember now, saying that until and unless you do away with unemployment, rapes will be common. Because only when men get employment, they get married and they're able to deal with their sexuality. What a bizarre argument is it? Govind ji and Rekha ji, this is a judge of Supreme Court, Markande Kajju, and he made a similar remark against the slum dwellers also, way back, in 2002 and 3. So I think, so in a way, we have as you said rightly, we have a patriarchal mindset, which we all need to question. I think the biggest thing is we need to question everybody. We need to question all the theoreticians, all the religions, all the patriarchs, be it Gandhi, Vivekananda, or whoever it may be. I think on the women's issue, many of our own leaders that we've been following for generations, they have failed. We should realize this. And I think as I bring this entire web talk to a close, I want to thank Rekha Pande for excellent talk, and Govindji for brilliant sharing, and all the participants, be it Simi, be it Arjun, be it Pragya, and others who commented, and those who were there listening to this entire conversation. I think thank you for this, and we look forward to more such discussions in future. There'll be many more series of these gender gaps. So please do come for that. And thank you, IMPRI. Thank you, People's Pulse. Thank you, the Gender Impact Studies Center of IMPRI, and Simi and Arjun.
The Delhi Post also.
And Delhi Post as well. And Delhi Post is actually doing this, they'll be capturing it and sharing it. Yes, I think Arjun, over to you now. Arjun and Simi.
No, sir, I just really want to thank everyone and invite to deliberate on such events, and have a very nice evening. Thank you, everyone. And we'll put the YouTube everywhere, so everyone can again see at their convenience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Zindabad. Zindabad.
Thank you.
Yes. Kelkar ma'am, good evening. Govind ma'am. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye.